So this week we are going to be looking at the sleeve. It's a love or hate situation. People can find sleeves a little bit scary, and I definitely did when I began pattern cutting because I just didn't understand what the hell I was looking for or how it worked. And I think sleeves can quite easily look not that great. And so it's always this nervousness that overtook me when I was making this sleeve of like, oh my God, is it going to be a good sleeve or not? So by the end of this week, you will have better understanding of what to look for when you're drafting a sleeve, kind of key points and methods to look out for. And then this can also be translated to other sleeves that you may be working with or other patterns that are pre-existing that maybe the sleeve's a little bit funny and you want to be able to adjust it maybe for your own size or just make it sit a bit nicer on the body. So this is going to give you the foundation to then be able to go and do that. So we're going to start again, like last week, I'm going to go through here a PDF of just some key things, key points, and then there'll be two other parts of this week where one will be how to check your armhole, and the second part will be then how to actually draft the sleeve. So for that, your option to go through it and just take it in and then sit down, go through it bit by bit and do it step by step as I go, or however you wish. So let's get going. I am going to share my screen. Oh, I always miss it. It's always right in front of me. I can never see it at first. So here we go. Week 3 of mastering your bodice block. Like I mentioned, we are going to be looking at drafting your sleeve block today. But before we do that, there are some key things that we want to look out for before we start, because often I've done this many times before where I would get carried away and want to make the bodice of my garment and the sleeve at the same time. And then I found that sometimes when I was starting pattern cutting, that actually my armhole shape was wrong, which then created the sleeve to look wrong. When actually the sleeve was actually okay, the pattern, but it was my armhole that was the problem. So before we make the sleeve, it's really important that we actually check our front and our back armhole shape. You might have heard of like the teardrop, where the front sort of scoops down a little bit more, like there's a bigger curve, and then the back is a bit less scooped. So you kind of got this like teardrop shape. So that's what we want to be looking out for. And in part 2 of this week, there is a video where I will talk through what to look out for exactly when looking for that teardrop shape. The second thing to check for is our front and back armhole measurements. You do this by just measuring around your armhole. I have a video in Pattern Wiz YouTube on how to actually measure with a tape measure, because often people can lay their tape measure flat, but the most accurate way to measure around a curve is holding your tape measure on its side and then going around like that. When we do this, we want the front armhole to be shorter than the back armhole, ideally. It may not be, it's not the end of the world, but that can help sometimes when you're starting to make your sleeve, because you've kind of got that foundation of, okay, my front's smaller than my back, and that's going to help my notch position, which I'll get to next. So have a look. For in this instance, it should be already like it is, smaller on the front than the back. But if not, then I'm going to explain to you what you can do also. So the reason why we do this, I really briefly mentioned, but we want our shoulder notch point, so that's where the sleeve sits on our shoulder, to be sitting slightly forward of the center line. So this is the center line here where my arrow is there. Just a reminder, this is your bicep line across here. And then this is the front, which I haven't labeled, so front of the sleeve, and this is the back of the sleeve. And we want our notch, the center point of the notch, to be slightly forward of that center line. And this is because if you imagine your arm is relaxed hanging down by your side, our arm naturally swings slightly forward. It's not like it swings backwards or straight down. There's a slight kind of, swinging forward of the arm. So therefore we want our sleeve to also kind of be tilted ever so slightly with the notch rotated, so that our sleeve naturally swings forward a little bit. If we haven't done that, or this is more, you'll notice this, I would say more so in tailored garments, where if that notch point isn't in the right position, that there'll be sort of cracking cracking down the sleeve where the sleeve wants to sort of be rotated forward a little bit more. So then it can kind of create cracking in the arm of the sleeve. And so questions that may come up around this are how much forward? So for the purpose of our bodice block, we want it to be between 4 mm to 8 mm forward of the center point. Doesn't have to be exactly that, but that's the kind of a ballpark what you can aim for. If you're making things in other fabrics, so jersey, for example, is a lot more forgiving. It stretches and it moves, so we don't notice sort of these like finer details sometimes. So for that, it's okay if it's right on the center. Even if it was like a tiny bit back, like it's not going to make so much difference. If you're making a coat or a jacket, then I would say it's better to have it even a little bit more forward, so between 8 mm to 12 mm. As if you imagine in your mind a tailored jacket, like the arm always looks like it's sort of like got that nice swing forward. So that's what we want to be looking for and thinking about. So these are just things to sort of, ballpark in the back of your mind about, I guess, like these technicalities of what to look for then when thinking about what fabric you're working with, what kind of design it is, and that can help determine how much you then want to bring it forward. So the next question would be, how much ease do we add? So ease is the extra amount of fabric that we have in the sleeve head. Ease gives it that nice roll. If you see the sleeve and it sort of like kind of has that gentle roll round, what creates that is having extra fabric there. Because if you imagine we're kind of going round a curve here. So from here, like round the arm, and we kind of need that extra fabric to roll round. So when it comes to a bodice block, 1.5 centimeters ease is a good amount to start with. Pardon, I'm recovering from a cold. Then depending on what kind of garments you're making, if you're making outerwear, then we can start to add more ease. If we're doing something like a shirt, then we don't want any ease, because if you imagine the shirt is normally French seamed all the way through, and we sew our sleeve indifferently. We sew our sleeve in flat, and therefore we don't have any ease. So this ease is also very garment dependent, and it might take a while if you're I guess not used to thinking about, do I need to add ease or not? It takes a while to get used to like what garments should have ease and what garments shouldn't have ease. And it's just sort of with practice you start to understand like, okay, this garment definitely needs ease and this one doesn't. And so depending also where our shoulder seam comes to. So if you look at me in the screen, I'm pointing to my shoulder. So we can say that this would be our shoulder point here. And say the cross shoulder is just there. So if our cross shoulder comes to say our true cross shoulder, then we don't need too much. We need like 1.5 ease to kind of get around here. If we start bringing and displacing our shoulder seam in to like here, then we are going to need more. And when we displace garments and bring it in here, so if we're doing something like a shoulder pad or something with pleats, we might bring the shoulder in, then we need more ease because we need to kind of get around the shoulder a little bit more here. So that's when we might add gathers or tucks or a dart into the shoulder to help give it that kind of more accessibility. I don't know if that's the right word, to go kind of around the shoulder. So then when we get to fitting the sleeve, I'm just going to bring up a few main issues that can happen. Firstly, there can be drag lines going through the sleeve, which is when we have lots of lines going through this part here. Your sleeve could swing slightly forward or backwards, so we want it to be swinging slightly forward, so that's just the other thing to look for. And does your sleeve head look flattering? So when I say flattering, no one likes a big arm. Does it make your arms feel like neat and like, I guess, flattering? If not, then it could be because we've got too much in the sleeve head that is kind of making the shoulder and the arm look a bit puffy. So then that would be the other thing to look out for. As well as is it sitting neatly in the underarm, or do we have like an excess wave or fabric kind of sitting at the underarm, in which case maybe our sleeve needs to be scooped out a little bit more. So those are things to look out for when fitting, and there will be another video that goes into more detail in fitting, but this was just a bit of like pre-information to give you for when you get to that place. So that is my little video for lesson 3 part 1. So go ahead and continue watching the rest of the parts in this series. But like feels like a tongue twister to say that out loud. And if you are enjoying these, then hit subscribe on my channel. I'd love to have you here because the more the merrier.